Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest stories from across the region. U.S. President Donald Trump is again signaling that military action against Iran is on the table, as the USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, has entered the Mediterranean, with its strike group moving east towards Iran. U.S. Air Force strategic airlifters have also been deployed to Europe. Let's listen to Trump.
Do you have any message to the Iranian people?
The Iranian people in Iran or people here?
People in Iran.
They better negotiate a fair deal. You know, the people of Iran are a lot different than the leaders of Iran. And it's very, very sad situation.
Options reportedly include targeting Iranian military leaders, striking nuclear and security facilities, and even contingency plans that could aim at regime change, though officials stress no final decision has been made. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister says a written counter-proposal could be ready within days and falsely insists the U.S. has not demanded zero uranium enrichment. Tehran says it is prepared for confidence-building measures to prove its program is peaceful. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff says President Donald Trump is curious as to why Iran has not yielded under mounting U.S. pressure as nuclear talks between the sides remain stalled on core issues. Listen here.
The president asked me that this morning, and I don't want to use the word frustrated. It's almost because he understands he's got plenty of alternatives. But it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't, I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated. Why under this sort of pressure with the amount of sea power, naval power that we have over there, why they haven't come to us and said, we profess that we don't want a weapon, so here's what we're prepared to do, and yet it's hard to sort of get them to that place.
Now, inside Iran, anti-regime demonstrations erupted across universities in the country as the new semester began, chanting anti-government slogans such as "Death to Khamenei" and calls for regime change. The rallies coincided with mourning ceremonies held 40 days after the deadly nationwide crackdown in which thousands of innocent protesters were brutally gunned down by the regime. At Amir Kabir University of Technology, video shows demonstrators chanting "Long live the king," a reference to Reza Pahlavi, son of Iran's ousted monarch. The student union says security forces later blocked exits and detained participants. Now, Hezbollah says 8 of its operatives were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon's eastern Bekaa Valley, including a figure identified as a commander, Hussein Mohammad Yagi. The IDF targeted 3 Hezbollah missile command centers, killing a large number of operatives. Lebanese media report that at least 10 people were killed and more than 50 wounded. President Joseph Aoun condemned the recent Israeli airstrikes in the Sidon and Bekaa Valley regions, saying the attacks frustrate efforts to stabilize the country. Aoun called the strikes a hostile act that undermines diplomatic initiatives led by Lebanon and its partners, including the United States. Meanwhile, a Saudi report claims Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRGC, is now effectively running Hezbollah, preparing the Lebanese terror group for a possible war with Israel and the United States. The same report says the IRGC officers recently arrived in Lebanon and are rebuilding Hezbollah's military capabilities, including its missile arsenal, even briefing fighters in the Bekaa Valley, where Israeli airstrikes hit overnight. Now, to discuss all these developments, we have with us Dr. Eric Mandel, founder and director at MEPIN, and Reserve Major General Alexander Greenberg, an expert on Iran from the JISS. Thank you, the both of you, for coming on the show. Eric, we'll start with you. Trump slowly coming to the realization that Iran can't be negotiated with?
We're trying to read the tea leaves here of where the president's going to go. Is he going to do like he did in June and not wait for the end of his self-imposed deadline and attack? Or is he looking for other things? So let's take a step back and read the tea leaves a little bit here. And by the way, one of the reasons I say we read the tea leaves more than we have in the past is that this Trump administration, the second compared to the first, is a very tight circle and leaks don't come out. Witkoff said he wants Iran to formally state that it will not have nuclear weapons. Now, that scares me a little bit that these wonderful transactional real estate lawyers of New York are realizing they're dealing with Shiite jihadists who practice tadiyah, religiously approved lying. I'll just tell you a quote because Laranjani, this is from Mohammed Javed Laranjani, who's one of Khamenei's leading advisors and actually was just elevated in a position in case the supreme leader is assassinated. This is his quote. It's Persian wisdom. We don't have to be ideal people. Everybody lies. Let's be good liars. So I think, when I hear Wickoff make statements like that, we want to hear the Iranians say something that we want to hear. I think that is not a good place to be. Reading the tea leaves a little further, Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is part of the Republican Party that has been very strong on that Israel is an indispensable ally, and that we after almost 50 years, 47 years that we've had this Iranian revolutionary regime that is not just bad for Israel. People forget this is horrific for America. The amount of American lives that have been taken, especially during the Iraq War. We don't have to go back to 83 and the Beirut bombing and 241 Marines that were killed. But I'll read what Graham said. He says, it's increasingly clear to me that voices opposing entanglement and the risk associated with decisive action are getting louder. And if that's true, and I don't think Graham is somebody who plays around with his statements, I think he's pretty direct. That implies something we do know, that there are voices in the administration that are saying, don't get involved here. Maybe just do a limited action, cut some deal, take some victory, and obviously this is not a straightforward decision for the United States, because what is going to be needed is going to be a campaign of many, many weeks, if not a few months. The remnants of this, when this regime collapse, are not necessarily going to go to regime change. And it's going to take patience, especially in a midterm election year. So the president is going to have a fateful decision to make. But the decision is clear to me that at this point, I would rather take my chances with regime collapse. If America also helps the protesters with strike funds, more Starlings, maybe help get others to send some weapons in there to help the protesters, and certainly verbally say we are pro-Iranian. I'm willing, I think the chance for American national security interest is to act now and not to back down and not to make it look like Iran is it comes out as the victor.
You spoke about those protests. Indeed, we are seeing renewed protests at universities in Iran. We're going to get to that in a minute. First of all, Alexander, what do you make of, indeed, where the negotiations are right now? We see the Iranians claiming that they are going to submit a counter proposal, confidence building measures. Is this, as Eric said, just taqiyya, which is lying for the purpose of whatever goals that they have? Or do they actually intend maybe to try to get some kind of deal here with President Trump?
The answer is very complicated. I think, first of all, it's clear that it is lying, not necessarily taqiyya, but the Iranians are trying to come back to their traditional tactics, meaning procrastination and endless talks, while preserving their smile attacks. It means they're moving one step forward and two steps backwards. In principle, one must take into account that any concession is impossible for the regime because giving up their missile program and their support for the proxies, meaning support for terrorism and, of course, the uranium enrichment, is tantamount for the regime to a political suicide, which the regime cannot simply afford, politically speaking, not only because of their Shia things, but also practically. And I don't think that anyone within the administration believes seriously to the Iranians. But given the general mood in America, I think Trump must prepare grounds for an imminent attack, because it's Trump promised no more wars, and we're talking about the war. No matter that it costs for America nothing in terms of boots on the ground and American lives.
Eric, where do America's allies besides Israel stand on this? The Europeans, the Sunni states, when it comes to the possible military action?
Well, what the word is that countries like Saudi Arabia, the Omanis, Bahrain, Egypt, they are telling President Trump not to attack. And you'll say, why? Didn't everything revolve for the past 40 plus years around Iran and all their nefarious activities and threatening all of these countries? The assessment is that those countries thinks that Iran is weak enough right now, and if they're weak enough right now, it is probably better to leave them weak and not to destabilize the regime further because they could be attacked. They could deal with what is going on right now. They don't want fossil fuels to go out of control, the market's out of control. So that's one ear that's going on. The Europeans, I really don't listen that much to their statements. They have been, lukewarm as far as, saying things regarding the protesters. But the bottom line question here is, will President Trump, for some deal, offer sanctions to a regime that killed 40,000 people in 2 days, maybe the worst atrocity since 1943 in Babi Yar, of that type, after the president said, to the Iranians, stop, which they didn't stop, and will he keep this just to a nuclear deal and minimize the ballistic missiles and the proxies and ignore the killings, rapes, torture of these protesters? So the protesters are supposedly, I've been watching the images as everybody has, they are back out. The young people in the universities in Tehran and other cities are out, again, risking their lives, knowing that the IRGC and the Bajis are willing to shoot them and kill them and purposely try to disfigure them for life going ahead. I know of a case, I work with Iran International, which is one of the opposition groups that does really good reporting. There was a 17-year-old who was injured, brought to a hospital, and the Iranian security forces killed him in his bed. I think he was hooked up to an IV and maybe intubated at the time. That part I don't know for sure. But the point is, these are the type of atrocities that are going on right now. And we have to ask ourselves, do we want to make a deal with this type of regime? And I think the answer is we should not. But the president may choose something much more limited. And I think, the president's also thinking about his legacy. He's thinking about, maybe I can get a Nobel Prize for this or for the Board of Peace back in Gaza. But if he leaves Iran intact and falls for their deception, however we describe it, I think history will not look favorably upon it.
Alexander, more protests in Iran, as we mentioned. Is there a chance of a return to those mass demonstrations in the streets that we saw around a month ago?
Well, I don't know what will happen, but judging by what they see and read in Persian regarding Iran, it's very difficult to imagine a full-scale comeback to the previous demonstrations because, look, I think it's very difficult to expect people taking to the streets in face of the barrels of machine guns because the repression was unprecedented and was very bloodthirsty. But still, despite of all that, we see the resumption of protests at the universities. Yet on the other hand, one may say that the regime knows how to cope with that specifically because the universities have always been in Iran an epicenter, so to say, of a protest. It does not endanger the regime. And I would like to say that it is all this imagination or scenarios that the regime will collapse by its own right are baseless because the IRGC are not a government body or security body that protects the regime. They are the regime. They have their resources, funds, and they have internet also, so they can hold a lot of time. They don't care about the suffering of the Iranian people.
That assessment?
I think Alexander is correct. They don't care about their people. And the most likely thing is the IRGC will be the one who picks up the remnants if there's regime collapse. You notice I use the word regime collapse and not regime change. When we say the word regime change, we automatically go to a positive picture. But when things fall apart, the strongest party takes over. Think about during the Arab Spring that quickly went to an Arab winter in Egypt. What was the strongest party after there were so many liberals who were part of the uprising? It was the Muslim Brotherhood. Here it's a much stronger group, the IRGC, which controls everything. And the IRGC would be more than happy if the supreme leader died. They could put in, and in fact, I thought that in the accession plan that the next supreme leader would be under IRGC control. IRGC controls, first of all, they almost totally control the economy. What the supreme leader was controlling, he was controlling tens of billions of dollars, I believe, in the Sadat conglomerate. So they control the economy, they control information, they control the weapons. They control all the security mechanisms, the overseas Quds force. I mean, you can just go on and on of what it is. And you probably have 20% of people in Iran who are strongly behind or profit from the regime. So even if 80% is there, the 80%, what can they do? If they don't have weapons, the security apparatus has not seen defections within it. They are willing to kill tens of thousands without hesitation. That's a hard thing. But we have seen some cracks. We have seen some political officials been arrested who've been that are part of the apparatus who have said there's enough's enough, and they got arrested. So there are some indications that there are cracks in the regime. We should be behind the scenes, I'll just say, CIA, looking to help defections within security apparatus. That has always been a litmus test to know that a regime may have enough cracks to fall. And again, how much we're going to be involved and how much will the kinetic campaign with no boots on the ground will do. And again, as I said, it's got to be one that is long lasting. It can't be one that we did in June. And think about it. Israel, according to David Ignatius from the Washington Post, Israel had planes in the air, day 12, about to attack the IRGC, and President Trump had them turned around. Is the president's inclination again to restrain Israel, or is the United States and Israel this time going to look to truly damage the regime and maybe lead to collapse and maybe have the foundation to build it to something better?
Well, certainly a crucial point will be with those IRGC and other people in the security apparatus. They're the ones who have the weapons. It really depends on them. Let's move to another topic. Alexander, we had that report about Iran reinserting themselves into Lebanon, really directing Hezbollah very closely at the moment. What do you make of those reports? And what do you make of the situation in southern Lebanon at the moment with Hezbollah?
Well, I don't think the situation altered a lot, and Iran, for the time being, is unable of seriously helping Hezbollah. Surely they may be trying to direct them or to order them to do this or that, yet their real capacity to deliver or to supply Hezbollah with weapons and resources is very limited. It is more than limited because, physically speaking, Iranian planes cannot land in Lebanon or Damascus or Syria any longer. So that decides everything. I would say that to the time being, again, Hezbollah is not supposed to attack Israel because they simply cannot, and they still have some considerations of survival. But in the event of an American or Israeli joint attack on Iran, Hezbollah may try to do something, but again, they cannot do much. It will be very limited because now Israel and America have the upper hand on what is going on in all the theaters.
Eric?
I think, yeah, I was going to say I have a little different perspective. I work with the Alma Research and Education Center and been following Hezbollah a lot. I think I don't know if we know what the potential of what Hezbollah has still left after Israel has attacked. What I do see is Israel, and with America closing its eyes, strikes every single day, many times and many times a day, against Hezbollah activity. And I see the amount of activity has increased in anticipation that if the IRGC is now in charge of Hezbollah, a kind of Willie Tafakur, where basically they follow what the supreme leader wants to do, or in this case, the IRGC, which is, if you will, one and the same. If they are following it and they're asked to be activated, if there is now war with Iran, I think Israel has been striking more to diminish it as much as it can. It has strikes, obviously, in the Beqar Valley, south of the Litani, north of the Litani. And so I think their potential of what they have could be more significant. I don't think they're totally disabled. I think they're still a very strong proxy force. And even if they want to be, for their survival to last longer, I'm not sure it's their decision anymore. Actually, it could be a blessing in disguise, because if they do decide to start attacking not just the 5 areas Israel has on the border that it's had since the war, but starts attacking Israeli cities again, and Israel goes in and devastates Hezbollah, maybe finally the Lebanese government could actually get control of the Lebanese armed forces, and maybe that Hezbollah would get weak enough that they could get control of the country. That is a hope, but that is maybe a silver lining if Israel has to respond to what Hezbollah does. I think there are so many potentials here. The bigger potentials also, the other proxy is coming from Yemen that could be activated in addition. And the other one, don't forget, and it's been very quiet, is the Iranian-controlled Iraqi militias, the Popular Mobilization Units that were still untouched, that they could also be called in as part of the resistance, the axis of resistance against Israel if there's a war. So there's going to be a multi-front war, I believe, if America goes and not just does a limited strike, if it strikes at all.
Alexander,
well,
yes, go ahead.
Yes, look, I also follow Alma, of course, and know them. I don't see any contradiction with what Eric has just said. Of course, I don't play down their devastating potential. But I only want to say that their capacity to do anything more that preceded the Beepers operation and the ensuing decapitation of Hezbollah is limited. Iraqis and Houthis, yes, they can, but Iraqis, I would say they're more dangerous for American bases in Iraq, yes. And the Houthis, again, it is hard to imagine that they can do anything more devastating than what they already have done. And either way, Israel can now unleash all its devastating power of replication to really to end up Hezbollah. And the last thing I want to say, there is no way the Lebanese government disarms Hezbollah, because they simply cannot physically. It's tantamount, to take a Jewish New York resident and ask him to go and disarm all the New York crime structures. It's impossible, because no one gonna risk his life to comply with American requirements. And never forget that half of the Lebanon, what we call the Lebanese army, consists of its private officers consist of Shia. There's no way they fight Hezbollah, and it's simply physically impossible. Yes, they want to do that, but it is impossible. So Israel will have to do that sooner than later.
Right, so you bring up the issue of the Lebanese government, and we heard there Joseph Aoun, the president, basically saying about these strikes, Israel is destabilizing the situation, and we have this possibility of some type of political arrangement. But from Israel's perspective, it's trying to actually enforce the ceasefire that was signed, which is that the Hezbollah are not supposed to be armed and to, on the Israeli border. So what do you make of the Lebanese state, the president's statements here, and at least their posture that they're giving out concerning this issue? Alexander and Eric.
As you say, it's only posture because, of course, Lebanese president or whoever else can never say, look, we cannot do that. We hope that Israel will do that. It's impossible either for them. But I don't think that anyone except for Hezbollah seriously fears Israeli actions or bombings because everyone knows they target only bad guys, will never bomb Christian or just Sunni areas. If Israel does something, it will strike Hezbollah concentrations and places and sites where they're deployed. But of course, they cannot say that overtly. So let's wait and see. The only thing that is important for everyone to consider that all this, American thought, which is very algorithmic, it goes by playbook. Let's for example, to have stability in Syria, must have united Syria, or Lebanese government must do something because it's government. Hi, it's not a government. It's just a conglomerate of confessions that you can call them government, but they never act as a normal government that acts along the lines of a playbook. It's impossible. So it's a Middle East and tribes and confessions. Who is stronger? This is what is the most decisive factor.
Eric, final words briefly before we go.
I do agree. Lebanon is a failed state, 50% Shiite, and I don't have great optimism there. But I want to come full circle back. We said that the proxies maybe not, there's a limited amount they could do, and I think we can agree upon it. The question really is, if Iran retaliates against Israel, does Israel, the questions are, have enough interceptors? What did Iran learn from the 12-day war to game the system to beat the interceptors? There is, the quantity of ballistic missiles. We're talking at least medium range. Short range don't reach Israel, but medium range could certainly hit American allies in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain. Yeah. But of the middle range ones, how many do they have, and how can they get through? And this is obviously a very serious concern for Israel.
Certainly a big ballistic missile attack tried to overwhelm the defense systems. That's something that Israel will be wary of. Alexander Greenberg and Eric Mandel, thank you, both of you, very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Now, U.S. commentator Tucker Carlson is facing backlash after falsely claiming that President Isaac Herzog visited Jeffrey Epstein's infamous island. He made the comments during a combative interview in Israel with U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee.
Current president of Israel, President President Herzog,
know him very well,
apparently was at Pedo Island. That's what it says in the disclosures.
Now, Huckabee responded that he was unaware of any such leak, which indeed never existed. After learning the claims were false, Huckabee said the allegations could be the stuff of libel lawsuits. Carlson later issued an apology on X for the misinformation.
Well, now we've received a long letter from President Herzog's office denying that he went to Epstein's island. In fact, denying unequivocally that he had any contact with Epstein ever. They didn't know each other. They never emailed with each other, never been in the same room. They had no relationship of any kind. I've gotten a lot of letters like this over the years from people alleging, oh, you got it wrong. But rarely do you get a denial this unequivocal. And so for that reason, we are taking it seriously. There's nothing worse than impugning the reputation of an innocent man. And so I just want to say clearly, I'm sorry to imply that I knew something I didn't know. Of course, I don't know that Isaac Herzog was on the island.
Beyond the hour. Thanks for watching.
At U Haifa International, academic excellence isn't just a standard, it's a way of life. With 21 English-taught master's programs, world-class faculty, and Israel's top national score in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, students grow in every direction.
If you really want to challenge yourself academically, grow in a very diverse community, and be immersed in such an important and significant environment, University of Haifa is the place for you.
Located on the stunning Carmel Ridge, the U Haifa blends academic excellence with a welcoming community.
U Haifa International has a great combination of top-notch academics with a great community of students.
Whether you're pursuing a one-year master's or diving into research, U Haifa gives you the tools, mentorship, and real-life insight to make your mark on the world. U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kolel Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kolel Chabad steps in with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help. And you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kolel Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now. Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time.
Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review. U.S. President Donald Trump has set a deadline for talks with Iran as major American military buildup moves continue. Trump has also spoken of regime change in Iran being a desired outcome. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
The aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford and its strike group are heading toward the Middle East, a deployment that could take up to 4 weeks, a timeline that appears to align with Trump's diplomatic ultimatum. Speaking outside the White House, Trump said, "If we need it, we'll have it ready," adding that if talks fail, it's going to be a very bad day for Iran.
What can Iran do to avoid attack? Give us the deal that they should have given us the first time. If they give us the right deal, we won't do that. But, you know, historically, they haven't done that. I will say they want to talk, but so far they do a lot of talking and no action. When are those talks, Mr. President? They've already started.
The escalation in rhetoric comes as Iran marks 40 days of mourning for those killed in a recent crackdown, with reports of growing public anger inside the country. Trump also spoke of the desirability of regime change in Iran.
Want regime change in Iran? Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen. For 47 years, they've been talking and talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives while they talk, and legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. It's been going on for a long time, so let's see what happens. In the meantime, we have the meantime, we have tremendous power has arrived, and additional power, as you know, another carrier is going out shortly. So we'll see it how. If we could get it settled for once and for all, that would be good.
Diplomacy is still on the table. A second round of talks between the U.S. and Iran is due to take place on Tuesday, hosted by Oman, but meeting in Geneva. Iran insists the talks are limited to the nuclear issue. Regarding the potential U.S. attack, officials in Washington say the options under review include strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, ballistic missile sites, and even the possibility of commando operations against key military targets. From an Israeli perspective, the developments are critical. Prime Minister Netanyahu has urged Washington not to let Tehran play for time amid concerns Iran could expand both its nuclear program and ballistic missile production. Washington is signaling a dramatic escalation toward Iran as President Trump publicly embraced the idea of regime change in Tehran, even as diplomatic talks continue.
A crowd of 250,000 showed up in Munich, Germany to support the Iranian people's struggle against their oppressive regime and to listen to the potential alternative, exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who gave an impassioned speech to the crowd. Let's take a listen.
The Iranian people are in full revolt, and the regime is at the weakest it's ever been. It's on the verge of collapse. It's a matter of time before this regime goes. My point, however, is that the world needs to understand, including the U.S. administration, that whether or not the Western world intervenes, our fight will continue, and the regime will collapse anyway. The only question is, at what price do the Iranian people can regain their freedom? If they have the support, there will be less casualties and will happen quicker.
Now our correspondent Alec Pollard joins us in studio. Alec, what can you tell us about this?
Right, so there is a very large Iranian diaspora in Germany and in general in Europe, and 99% of the Iranian diaspora is against the regime. Many of them are exiles and people who fled the regime, and also we saw in the demonstration a lot of their allies throughout Europe demonstrating, protesting the situation, and also coming there because Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the Shah, is a potential person who could replace the Islamic Republic, replace the regime, which is obviously something that is talked in the air about what is the alternative to what is now, who has legitimacy to govern Iran the day after, and all such talk. It's interesting to note that Reza himself has laid out a plan for transition for Iran, which would mean that he would only be a transitional figure, a transitional leader for a new government, for electing a proper constitution moving forward, but that is at least a plan for the day after of potentially toppling the regime that would involve the exiled crown prince.
We'll certainly keep following. Thank you, Alec Pollard.
And joining us now with more on Iran is Benham Ben Talebu, Senior Director of the Iran Program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
So the Trump administration is insisting on continuing negotiations with the Ayatollah regime. And what kind of remains unclear, there's many conflicting reports, that the negotiations, are they solely focusing on the nuclear issue, or are they also addressing the ballistic missile and regional proxy threat?
Well, even if they did focus solely on the nuclear issue, it would be a mistake to ignore the missile threat, because ballistic missiles can indeed carry weapons of mass destruction like nuclear weapons. So there's an incentive to certainly nest that issue into the larger nuclear complex, if you will. The challenge is the Trump administration, in particular President Trump, has been saying multiple things about what a deal does and does not include in the scope of their negotiations. And I guess right now their goal is to make sure that American allies and American adversaries have to keep hedging to figure out the exact parameters of the nuclear talks.
Mm-hmm. And now President Trump also stated that Operation Midnight Hammer back in June completely destroyed Iran's nuclear program. So if that is the case, I mean, what is there to discuss now regarding the nuclear program? I mean, what threat does the regime pose on this issue today?
Well, what the Operation Midnight Hammer destroyed, and make no mistake, it did destroy 3 major nuclear facilities. It earned a pause. It earned a stop in enrichment in Iran, which we had not seen since April 2006. So that's why it was both historic and impactful. But what the operation took away was the regime's enrichment capacity, meaning how much enrichment it could do at a certain period of time. because it targeted 2 enrichment facilities and 1 larger nuclear complex. But it did not remove entirely Iran's enrichment capability. That enrichment capability is what was actually targeted by the Israelis for the other portion of the 12-day war, to include centrifuge production plants, to include nuclear scientists, to including other nuclear research centers, and things of the like. But there still is a lingering capability there, whether you're looking at technical know-how, other facilities, or personnel.
And Israeli and even U.S. officials, we've heard, are expressing skepticism about reaching a deal, a nuclear deal or any other kind of deal. And so even if a deal is reached, can the U.S. trust that the regime will even uphold their end of the deal? Because we know in the past they've lied, they've misled the international community, they've misled atomic inspectors. So can they even be trusted to uphold the deal?
In short, no, but that's, in my view, not even the main reason to have qualms with the deal or with any deal at this moment in time. Because I believe there is no nuclear off-ramp, there is no diplomatic off-ramp to the crisis that has forced this conversation right now. And that crisis missing from the conversation about talks that are slated to be held in Geneva tomorrow is that they are going to be on the back end of the worst repression, the worst mass killing from the state against the street in the 47-year history of the Islamic Republic, and also in the past century and a half of contemporary Iranian history. When looking at that small window of time in January between when 36 to 43,000 protesters were killed by this regime, President Trump not once, not twice, but multiple times offered assistance to the Iranians, said that he would hold those who engaged in the crackdown responsible, and even said that help was on the way. And that's why right now nuclear talks can indeed be disheartening. And one, in my view, medium-term reason that the administration and that the Iranians are actually engaging with the administration is to actually create this impression of the loss of American support in the psyche of Iranian dissidents and in the psyche of Iranian protesters who are banking on that Western assistance. So you're right. Not only is there no trust, and not only is the Islamic Republic keen to run the clock past the Trump administration and say we lived past max pressure 2.0 like we did max pressure 1.0, but right now, again, there is no moral, political, strategic case for that engagement. But make no mistake, President Trump is as much negotiator-in-chief as he is commander-in-chief, so he's looking to exhaust all options before going back to the use of force.
And it's interesting that you brought that up. That was actually going to be my next question, really, is how can the Trump administration or President Trump reconcile sort of those tweets, you know, help is on the way, urging Iranians to take to the street, you know, and then seeing the Iranian regime cross his red line and yet still go into sort of the diplomacy option? I mean, how does he reconcile that? And should they reach a deal, I mean, what you know, will happen to the Iranian people?
Well, it's critical that he does reconcile that for 3 reasons, in my view. One, political, is that the Trump administration, both in term 1 and term 2, has tried to draw a very sharp contrast to its Democratic predecessor. Just look at the Obama administration, for example. President Trump drew a sharp contrast with Obama in 2009, who didn't support Iran's Green Movement protests and preference nuclear diplomacy. And instead, in President Trump's first term, he issued strong rhetorical and political support multiple times for Iranian protesters. So, you know, he has a political interest to keep drawing that sharp contrast rather than create a comparison. Next, of course, is strategic. After actually the Obama administration failed to enforce its own red line in Syria in 2013, you may remember, in 2014, the Russians invaded Crimea. And similarly, every time the U.S. looks weak abroad, it actually invites more kind of chaos and mayhem at, you know, the global stage. 2021, the U.S. left Afghanistan in a very disastrous way, as you may remember. Months later, the U.S. failed to deter Putin from invading Ukraine again in early 2022 for strategic reasons. The president has an incentive to uphold his red lines, and also for moral reasons, to course correct, get to the heart of what he mentioned. He promised support to the most pro-American and to the most pro-Israeli population in the heartland of the Muslim Middle East. Those things are hard to find in that part of the world. That's a card that ought not to be burned. President Trump is remarkably popular in Iran because of him breaking all the taboos in his first term. It'd be a shame to lose that political capital and vindicate the talking points of some of the most anti-American folks in that part of the world.
So certainly critical days ahead. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
And in other news, 2 female IDF soldiers were chased and attacked by a violent mob in Bnei Brak. sparking widespread condemnations from across Israel's political and religious spectrum. The two servicewomen, squad commanders in the Education and Youth Corps, were on an official home visit to a Haredi soldier when hundreds of ultra-Orthodox men surrounded them, forcing them to hide behind dumpsters as police rushed to their rescue. Disturbing footage showed officers shielding the soldiers while rioters overturned a police car and set a motorcycle on fire. 23 suspects were arrested. 3 officers were lightly injured. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir called the incident an intolerable reality, saying soldiers must be able to move freely anywhere in the state of Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the attack as completely unacceptable, stressing that the rioters represent an extreme minority. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir echoed that message, promising those responsible would pay a heavy price. Significantly, senior Haredi leaders also spoke out. United Torah Judaism chairman Yitzhak Goldknopf said the violence was contrary to the Torah. Shas leader Aryeh Deri warned it could damage the community's struggle against conscription. And former Chief Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef went further, calling for those involved to be cast out of the community. And moving on, the Board of Peace is set to convene this Thursday in Washington, with several countries expected to commit billions of dollars towards the reconstruction of Gaza. The meeting is also expected to include announcements about a proposed international stabilization force, with thousands of personnel planned to help maintain security and order in the territory. ILTV's India Naftali joins us now from the studio with more details. India, what can you tell us?
Thank you, Lidar. That's right. There's going to be a Board of Peace summit in Washington this Thursday. It will be the first formal leader meeting of the Board of Peace, and the focus will be the reconstruction of Gaza. Now, there are already expected to be $5 billion pledged to the reconstruction of Gaza. Most of that money will be pledged by Gulf nations, but also the United States. They will also discuss the security of Gaza during the phase 2 of the ceasefire, which includes the International Stabilization Force, the proposed International Stabilization Force. Now, what will that force do? Well, they would work alongside local police in Gaza to maintain order. For example, Indonesia has already pledged 8,000 troops to go be there on the ground in Gaza. So where does Israel stand in all of this? Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Trump's Gaza plan will not work if Hamas is not disarmed. Netanyahu just said the other day, they don't have tanks, they don't have large weaponry, but they do have these AK-47s, and they're using them, and they're attacking Israeli forces as up until even today. Now,
I mean, it's interesting because really the second phase can't go forward unless Hamas disarms. And is the International Stabilization Force going to take part in disarming Hamas?
Well, that's the big question. We just heard the news. An aide of Netanyahu said that either Hamas disarms within 60 days or the IDF will disarm Hamas. That's the news that we do know. This Board of Peace, there are a lot of critics. A lot of countries are joining, but many European countries actually are hesitant to join because they're concerned that it will replace the framework of the UN. Now, just to affirm, this Board of Peace has been given authority by the UN Security Council to deal with this current situation in Gaza, but Trump is imagining that this Board of Peace framework would also confront issues also in Ukraine and other areas of conflict.
Absolutely. So there's still a lot of details to work out there. I guess we'll continue to follow the story, of course, on Thursday. India, Naftali, thank you so much for joining us with the latest.
Thank you, Lidar.
And moving on, the IDF and Shin Bet say they carried out a series of airstrikes over the past 24 hours in northern Gaza, Gaza City, and Khan Yunis, following what they described as blatant ceasefire violations. According to the army, the attacks were launched after armed terrorists emerged from a tunnel and approached IDF forces near the ceasefire line in northern Gaza, posing what the army called an immediate threat. The Israeli Air Force struck the operatives, killing at least 2. Additional targeted strikes were carried out against terror figures the IDF says were working to rebuild militant capabilities and advance attacks against Israel. Among those killed was Ahmed Bayuk, identified by the IDF as a Hamas terrorist who took part in the October 7th massacre and raided the Re'im base. In a separate strike in eastern Rafah, forces eliminated Assem Abu Holi, head of Islamic Jihad's Nukba unit, in the central camps, accused of supplying weapons, training operatives, and planning attacks, including kidnapping scenarios. The IDF says it will continue to act against any threats to its forces and against attempts by terror groups to reestablish their capabilities in Gaza. And the Islamic Republic of Iran held live military exercises in the Strait of Hormuz and announced it was temporarily shutting down the strait in a rare move. The naval drill, which began yesterday, is an apparent show of force as President Donald Trump threatens military action and even regime change if diplomacy fails. The drills were described by Iranian state media as a response to potential security and military threats. The exercises involved both the regular Iranian Navy and the naval arm of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, including fast attack boats, submarines, drones, and coastal missile batteries. So far, there are no reports of direct incidents with commercial or foreign military vessels, but shipping companies are closely monitoring the situation. Iran has in the past threatened to close the strait in response to sanctions or military pressure, though it has never followed through. The exercises are expected to continue for several days. The timing comes amid a U.S. military buildup in the region, including deploying a second aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford Strike Group. The USS Lincoln Strike Group is already in the region, with the Americans now deployed in the Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea, Red Sea, and the Eastern Mediterranean. With military forces on high alert and diplomacy hanging in the balance, the risk of escalation remains very high. And meanwhile, visiting U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham said that President Trump will decide between war and a deal with Iran within weeks and not months. Speaking at a press conference in Tel Aviv, he had this to say.
My presence here today is to reassure the Israeli people there is no light or gaps between President Trump and Bibi about what to do and how to do it. There are two lines in the water right now. One's a diplomatic line, trying to find a way to end this regime diplomatically that will advance our national security interest. The other line is the military option. I think President Trump is looking for which line can catch the biggest fish. The bottom line is we're into weeks, not months, in terms of decision making.
Families across Iran have been defying heavy regime pressure and threats to honor victims of the January protests, as the 40th day memorial marks a powerful symbol of resistance. Across Iran, mourners gathered at gravesites holding memorials for those killed in the crackdown on January 8th and 9th. Despite threats from security forces, cemetery closures, and heavy patrols, families performed traditional rituals, released doves, and even danced in grief. Videos show crowds chanting "Death to Khamenei" and applauding the slain, with internet disruptions reported in several areas. Victims ranged widely in age, including children and teens, highlighting the heavy toll on Iran's youth. Footage surfaced from multiple cities, including Mashhad, showing regime forces raiding and arresting mourners. In the village of Chenar, regime forces violently raided a memorial and arrested a reported 400 Iranians, including children, out of a population of only 4,000. Chenar went viral in the past month for tearing down a statue of the late IRGC terrorist commander Qasem Soleimani, and again for the 40-day memorial yesterday, as they held a large protest and chanted "Death to the dictator." As of now, tens of thousands have been arrested across Iran from the protests, which began in December. And with each day, the regime is sentencing more to death. All the while, the regime itself held a memorial appropriating the deaths of the civilians they massacred and claimed it was the result of Zionist sedition. Analysts say the 40th day memorial has become a potent symbol of public defiance, illustrating the deep wounds left by the regime's crackdown and the continuing determination of Iranians to honor those killed. Well, Hezbollah now says it rejects the Lebanese government's plan to disarm the terror group within 4 months, calling it a move serving Israel. Amid the fragile ceasefire, the IDF continues to hit Hezbollah and other threats. The latest operation took out 2 Islamic Jihad operatives crossing from Lebanon into Syria. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The latest IDF airstrike took place near the village of Majd al-Anjar in the Bekaa Valley, on a road leading from Beirut to Damascus, about 40 kilometers north of Israel. The IDF says the targeted operatives had been working to advance terror activities against Israel from Lebanese territory and posed an immediate threat to citizens and IDF troops in Syria. Lebanese authorities reported 4 people were killed. Meanwhile, in Beirut, Hezbollah officials said the government's 4-month timeline for implementing the second phase of the nationwide disarmament plan was unacceptable. Hezbollah Secretary General Sheikh Naim Qassem described the effort as a mistake that, what he said, serves the goals of Israeli aggression. Shiite ministers walked out of the cabinet meeting in protest. Israel maintains that Hezbollah's weapons outside of state control pose a direct threat to security and say actions like the strike on the Syrian-Lebanese border are part of ongoing efforts to prevent Hezbollah and other terror factions from rebuilding and rearming along the northern border.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. See you next week.
President Donald Trump is hosting the inaugural meeting of the newly formed Board of Peace in Washington, an international initiative aimed primarily at post-war Gaza reconstruction and stability. Some 24 nations will attend. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the report.
The White House says member states have committed more than $5 billion in humanitarian and reconstruction aid for Gaza and plan to provide thousands of personnel for an international stabilization force and local security support. The first official session is set to take place at the U.S. Institute of Peace Building in Washington, where Trump is expected to outline the board's agenda, focusing on Gaza's rebuilding, humanitarian relief, and security planning following the fragile ceasefire.
President Trump will host a Board of Peace meeting at the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace, where he will announce that member states have pledged more than $5 billion towards the Gaza humanitarian and reconstruction efforts and have also committed thousands of personnel to the International Stabilization Force and local police to maintain security and peace for Gazans.
France, Germany, and the United Kingdom have declined to join the Board of Peace, questioning its mandate and fit with the United Nations. The European Union is sending only an observer, while Norway, Sweden, Spain, and other Western European states have also refused full membership over concerns it could undermine the UN-led process. From an Israeli perspective, the meeting is being watched closely as a potential turning point in the region's post-war order, with Jerusalem looking for concrete steps that promote stability without compromising Israel's security interests. Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar is representing Israel at the meeting and expressed support for the initiative during a stop at the United Nations that included sharp criticism of the world body.
I will have the honor of representing Israel at President Trump's Board of Peace Summit. We support President Trump's plan. At its heart is the disarmament of Hamas, demilitarization of Gaza Strip, and de-radicalization of Palestinian society there. If these are achieved, there will, for the first time, be a chance to move forward a new reality in Gaza and the region. The security, stability, and prosperity of all depend on it.
The Board of Peace convening tonight for the first time in Washington.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest headlines from across the region. U.S. President Donald Trump is again signaling that military action against Iran is on the table as the USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, has entered the Mediterranean with its strike group moving east towards Iran. U.S. Air Force strategic airlifters have also been deployed to Europe. Here's Trump.
Do you have any message to the Iranian people?
The Iranian people in Iran or people here?
People in Iran.
They better negotiate a fair deal. They better negotiate. You know, the people of Iran are a lot different than the leaders of Iran. And it's very sad situation.
Options reportedly include targeting Iranian military leaders, striking nuclear and security facilities, and even contingency plans that could aim at regime change, though officials stress no final decision has been made. Iran's foreign minister says a written counterproposal could be ready within days and insists the U.S. has not demanded zero uranium enrichment, despite previous statements from Washington. Tehran says it is prepared for confidence-building measures to prove its program is peaceful. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff says President Donald Trump is curious as to why Iran has not yielded under mounting U.S. pressure as nuclear talks between the sides remain stalled on core issues.
The president asked me that this morning, and I don't want to use the word frustrated. It's almost because he understands he's got plenty of alternatives. But it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't, I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated. Why under this sort of pressure with the amount of sea power, naval power that we have over there, why they haven't come to us and said, we profess that we don't want a weapon. So here's what we're prepared to do, and yet it's hard to sort of get them to that place.
Now inside Iran, anti-regime demonstrations erupted across universities in the country as the new semester began, chanting anti-government slogans such as "Death to Khamenei" and calls for regime change. The rallies coincided with mourning ceremonies held 40 days after last month's deadly nationwide crackdown in which thousands of innocent protesters were brutally gunned down by the regime. At Amir Kabir University of Technology, video shows demonstrators chanting "Long live the King," a reference to Reza Pahlavi, son of Iran's ousted monarch. The student union says security forces later blocked exits and detained participants. Hezbollah says 8 of its operatives were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon's eastern Bekaa Valley, including a figure it identified as a commander, Hossein Mohammad Yagi. The IDF says it targeted 3 Hezbollah missile command centers, killing a large number of operatives. Lebanese media report at least 10 people killed and more than 50 wounded. President Joseph Aoun condemned the recent Israeli airstrikes in the Sidon and Bekaa Valley regions, saying the attacks frustrate efforts to stabilize the country. He called the strikes a hostile act that undermines diplomatic initiatives led by Lebanon and its partners, including the United States. Meanwhile, a Saudi report claims Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRGC, is now effectively running Hezbollah, preparing the Lebanese terror group for a possible war with Israel and the United States. U.S. commentator Tucker Carlson is facing backlash after falsely claiming that President Isaac Herzog visited Jeffrey Epstein's infamous island. The remark was made during Carlson's interview in Israel with U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Carlson asserted that Herzog was listed as a visitor of Epstein, despite there being no evidence of any connection between the Israeli president and Epstein. Huckabee responded that he was unaware of any such link, which indeed never existed. After learning the claims were false, Huckabee said the allegations could be the stuff of libel lawsuits. Carlson later issued an apology on X for the misinformation. That's all for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. You can scan the QR code on your screen for our WhatsApp channel for constant updates throughout the day. I'm Alec Pollard, and I will see you next time.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS. Today we have a major scandal to expose that warrants a prompt investigation in the US and UK into Western influencers who are shilling for the Islamic Republic of Iran, going on influencer trips to sanitize the regime's image after their massacre of their own citizens. Currently, the regime is under extensive international sanctions for a litany of crimes, but it's already admitted that it funds foreign influencer delegations to rehabilitate its global image in recent years, and now they're doing it with the US and UK citizens. Here's what we know. In 2023, the Islamic Consultative Assembly approved a cultural budget provision authorizing the Islamic Culture and Relations Organization, ICRO, and similar state bodies to enter into contracts with foreign nationals for up to $20 million. Yeah, $20 million for the promotion and marketing of the regime. In November 2024, the Tehran municipality even admitted that it paid for a delegation of 12 foreign influencers, covering hotel and travel expenses. Regime media also reported that government bodies financed those trips. Yet mysteriously, separate reporting in regime media described municipal media contracts whose details later disappeared from the regime's transparency portal, particularly spending tied to media and social media outreach. How convenient! Well, one of these vile individuals on the current trip is Pakistani-British Islamist Bushra Sheikh. Now, Bushra is a Hamas fangirl, and she's publicly described activists tearing down posters of kidnapped Israeli hostages as heroic. She advocates for Sharia law openly while living in the United Kingdom, where she benefits from the protections of a secular democratic system, and does not herself wear a hijab. Now, she's inside Iran, a country where women are imprisoned or worse for refusing mandatory hijab. And she's so tone deaf that she actually filmed herself bragging about not wearing a hijab and falsely implied that women have a choice in Iran. Ironically, in subsequent videos from inside Iran, she is wearing one. I guess it's maybe not so free after all, Bushra? Take a look.
What's amazing, guys, is I have walked this entire rally in the middle of Iran without a hijab on. And I know what loads of you are thinking. You're thinking, how is she in the middle of Tehran at that square without her scarf on? Nothing has happened to me. Nobody has abused me. Nobody has said anything. In fact, when you are a visitor in Iran, they treat you so well, even me, without a hijab. But it's the fact that I have come here, I have been welcomed, and nobody has said a single thing to me about my hair being uncovered. And that, for you, my friends, is the reality of news when it's brought to you live from the country, especially when you have been propagandized for a long time by Western media. And that is simply not true.
Absolutely delusional, not to mention a slap in the face to all of the women of Iran who have suffered under the morality police. Just disgusting, a despicable, shameful person. Now, it's also relevant that in 2024, she publicly posted that she'd been invited by Iranian ministers to join an official 10-day conference tour. Now, I can't confirm whether that prior invitation resulted in a government-funded trip, and she hasn't publicly stated that this current visit is government-sponsored, but it establishes prior direct engagement with regime officials in an official capacity. And given the sites she's visited on this tour, it's highly likely that this is indeed a government-paid tour. But beyond being morally despicable, there is a legal angle to this issue that needs to be investigated and thoroughly. Under the UK's Iran Sanctions Regulations 2023, UK nationals are bound by sanctions law wherever they are in the world. They're prohibited from dealing with the funds or economic resources of a designated person, or from receiving economic resources from a designated entity without a license from the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation. Economic resources can include flights, hotels, hospitality, logistics, and other travel expenses provided in kind. If a UK national participating in this current delegation received travel, accommodation, or other economic resources funded through the regime bodies, that could constitute a prohibited dealing under UK sanctions law, unless an OFSI license was obtained, which I find highly unlikely to be the case for Bushra. The UK government must investigate her. This isn't just an issue of her unfathomably heinous views. Rather, it's an issue of national security. But she wasn't alone. Kala Walsh is another revolting activist on this same delegation right now. She's the founder of Palestine Action US, a former Democratic Party progressive activist, and of course a communist. Real winner there. Anyway, this isn't actually her first trip to Iran. On a previous visit, she was filmed chanting death to America and death to Israel. She also visited IRGC weapon sites and praised institutions tied to the IRGC, which is a designated terror group by the United States and subject to extensive sanctions. Under U.S. sanctions law, U.S. persons are broadly prohibited from engaging in transactions with the government of Iran or with designated entities such as the IRGC without a specific license. Now, that prohibition includes receiving funds or things of value from sanctioned entities and providing services to them. OFAC defines services broadly, and it can include promotional activities or participation in events that materially benefit sanctioned bodies. There are narrow exceptions for journalism, humanitarian work, or licensed academic exchanges. Kala Walsh doesn't fall into any of those categories. If she received travel or accommodation funded by the government of Iran, Tehran municipality, IRGC-linked institutions, or affiliated cultural bodies, or if she provided services that materially benefited those sanctioned entities, such as providing propaganda to sanitize the regime's image as she has done, that could easily fall within the scope of OFAC enforcement. The regime has already admitted that it funds these types of delegations. It's admitted covering expenses in the past. It's authorized contracts with foreign individuals for image promotion. And given that documented pattern, the question is whether Western nationals currently participating in this delegation received economic resources or provided services in violation of sanctions law. And that is a question that deserves investigation as soon as possible. Well, it's been a busy weekend, and I myself just returned from Munich, where I spoke at the massive Iranian protest alongside numerous European MPs, Senator Lindsey Graham, and the Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi. And what a protest it was. More than 250,000 people came out in the freezing rain to send a message to the United States and the entire Western world that the Iranian people need assistance. Yes, military assistance with bringing down the Islamic Republic. As we've seen consistently in recent weeks, the Iranian people are waiting with bated breath to see if the United States will strike the Islamic Republic and help them bring down their oppressors. President Trump has made stern warnings to the regime, but continues to say that his first choice is to avoid a military conflict and make a deal. Something that I would argue is completely misguided in the first place, unless it's simply posturing. That said, we did see a bit of a change of tune from President Trump again this week. Let's take a look.
Offers the change in Iran? Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen. For 47 years, they've been talking and talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives while they talk, and legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. Tremendous power has arrived, and additional power, as you know, another carrier is going out shortly. So we'll see it how if we could get it settled for once and for all, that'd be good. What do you want it for? What? Would you want to take over? I don't want to talk about that. There are people.
Well, interesting response from President Trump. Definitely a welcome comment given his previous comments, but it'll be interesting to see what he means by hopefully we can get it all done. President Trump has indeed sent a second aircraft carrier to the Middle East this past week, and the U.S. military is poised and positioned to begin what looks like or what could be a large-scale operation against the Islamic regime in Iran. But they're still trying to negotiate, and most recently, the Islamic regime has offered to establish economic ties that would benefit the U.S. as part of this negotiating strategy. But the truth is, there's nothing the Islamic Republic can offer other than their resignation that would be sufficient. As I said on the stage in Munich, Iranians aren't interested in a deal. 40,000 of them, more than 40,000, didn't die so that they can make a deal that limits yet preserves the Islamic regime. But it wasn't just in Munich that this important event took place on Saturday. Yes, this week is the Munich Security Conference, an important meeting of world leaders, particularly from Europe, analyzing national security issues. That was why that main demonstration was held in Munich. But we also saw hundreds of thousands of people show up to protest all over the world on behalf of the people of Iran. In Los Angeles, more than 370,000 people came. In Toronto, 500,000. And incidentally, in every single protest, Israeli flags were present, not just being held by Israelis, but by Iranians. In Munich, for the first time in my life, I felt safe walking with an Israeli flag in Europe, which is a little bit sad, but also a clear reflection of where Iranians stand. These people are pouring their hearts and souls out into the streets for the hope of freedom and regime change in Iran. And they sent a clear message that was heard around the world through just one day of peaceful protesting. And let me break this down for you a little bit more, because honestly, it's truly remarkable that many people were involved in so many places and that no one got arrested or had any kind of incident. Iranians have not only demonstrated to the world that they want regime change and that they want Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as the transitional leader, but they've also sent a message to the world on how to behave in major protests. Everywhere there were protests of Iranians, there were zero incidents, and the protesters behaved with respect for each other, for the environment, and for law enforcement. Now, contrast that to the encampments on campuses in the U.S. or the violent anti-Israel protests that we saw for more than 2 years after October 7th. Iranians brought flowers for law enforcement, and I witnessed them repeatedly thanking them for their efforts to keep the peace. And do you remember how Palestinian activists left the protests after the fact? A complete mess with trash and destruction everywhere that they left for others to clean up for them. In contrast, Iranians spent hours cleaning up trash, including in the freezing cold in Toronto and in Munich, to ensure that they respected the countries that allowed them the freedom to protest, a freedom that they don't have inside of Iran right now. This isn't to put on a show, it's a part of who they are. It's their character and their culture, and that is something that, frankly, even in Israel, we could take a lesson from. The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit will take place April 15 to 17 at the Waldorf Astoria here in Jerusalem. Register today at jns-summit.org and use the coupon code JNSTV, that is JNSTV, one word, to receive 20% off all tickets. Looking forward to seeing you here in Jerusalem. But while the Iranian people have made their demands peacefully and clearly, some, it seems, are still trying to subvert that message. Despite the fact that we saw an unprecedented scale of protests internationally from the Iranian diaspora and allies, some media networks, including Voice of America Farsi, which is funded by U.S. taxpayers, seem to be intentionally avoiding reporting on this issue. How can more than 1 million people around the world unite with one common demand, yet VOA Farsi doesn't even report it? Now, VOA Farsi has come under harsh criticism lately after Kari Lake, a Trump appointee, hired Ali Javanmardi to lead the channel. Javanmardi is an Iranian Kurdish journalist who has been accused of being a separatist and promoting separatist ideology, which is something that the Iranian people, including the majority of Iranians, strongly and passionately oppose. Territorial integrity is a core value of the Iranian people. But it's clear that whatever is actually going on with Javanmardi is not in agreement with what the Iranian people are demanding right now. And instead of doing his job and reporting properly, there seems to be a censorship of Iranian voices inside Iran and abroad that are calling for the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi to become the transitional leader. Now, throughout the protests in Iran, the coverage on VOA Farsi was wildly skewed, and there were reports, though unconfirmed, that VOA Farsi journalists were directed not to share videos and content of people on the ground risking their lives to call for the return of Reza Pahlavi. Now, even more concerning is that the MEK group, which I explained about last week, is a Marxist Islamist group that helped Khomeini come to power in '79. They too held a small demonstration in Munich the day before. Funny enough, that showed up in VOA Farsi, but not the 250,000 patriots demanding regime change. VOA Farsi has an important role in distributing information to Iranians in the voice of the United States. Literally, it's funded by the taxpayer. So why is Javanmardi seemingly promoting an agenda that isn't in the interest of Iranians or in the interests of the United States? The bias is blatant and it warrants action. Literally, the last thing that an American taxpayer-funded news network should be doing is silencing the will of the Iranian people. Now, Kari Lake is aware of this problem, as many Iranians have complained to her, yet instead of taking action to remedy the problem, she's proceeded to block Iranians who call this out and even double down on defending Javan Mahdi. I would like to give Kari Lake the benefit of the doubt and assume that she just doesn't really understand the sensitivities of this issue for Iranians, but if that's really the case, blocking Iranians who are trying to tell you otherwise is not the way forward. And with that, let's jump to the good, the bad, and the ugly of the week. Now, I know the whole point of the good, the bad, and the ugly is the phrase, but I've heard from you guys that you don't like to end the show on such a negative note. So from now on, I'm going to do things a little differently with the good, the bad, and the ugly in a different order. We'll start with the ugly story, move to the bad story, and finish off on a positive note with the good story of the week. So to kick things off, the ugly story of the week: extremism in Israel. Yes, in Israel. This week, disturbing footage was released yesterday of 2 female Israeli police officers being chased and harassed by a mob of ultra-Orthodox Israelis in Bnei Brak. Apparently, this happened because they went to visit another officer in the area, and the extremists began violently rioting, overturned a police car, and the 2 officers had to be extracted physically. Take a look at what happened. Disgusting behavior, difficult to watch, but unfortunately, this isn't the first time that we've seen things like this happen. Right now, Israel is facing a major internal political issue, as many of the ultra-Orthodox are exempt from the army draft. And there's been an ongoing effort to remedy that because, in my opinion, everyone should serve their country equally. There shouldn't be different standards for different people if they're all citizens, especially when national service within their own communities is an option. However, we have seen that some rabbis have actually incited against IDF soldiers and the state of Israel itself in order to advance their own political agendas and interests, which really ultimately damages both sides. There have also been ongoing efforts in segments of the ultra-Orthodox population, of course not all of them, that have been engaging in a campaign to erase women from public life and conversation as much as possible. We've seen some of these extremists defacing advertisements that feature women in recent years and otherwise behaving in ways that honestly have more in common with the morality police in Iran than they do with the values of the state of Israel. It's completely unacceptable, and it's against Judaism. You don't get to just destroy other people's property because you don't like something. You don't get to threaten and harass women, screaming and cursing like savages because they're different from you. It's something that this society should never accept, whether religious or secular. Erasing women from society not only leads to a stagnated economy, but it also means that their needs, even at the most basic level like healthcare, aren't met. It means their issues related to things like health aren't on the agenda because people don't know about them. It means that what makes them successful, contributing members of society isn't a priority for the nation. And it means that they're excluded from the rooms where conversations that affect their very futures take place. This is something that goes against everything that we believe in. Piousness doesn't equate to the erasure of a woman's voice. And now our bad story of the week is a bit of a good take on a bad phenomenon. There's an activist and a friend of mine called Adiel Cohen who creates amazing content about Israel. Now, he's been traveling all around the world, especially in Latin America, and meeting with people from different countries. And he has a variety of colorful stories to tell, both positive and negative, as would somewhat be expected. But the one phenomenon that we continue to see around the world that is amplified by social media is the tolerated hatred, specifically of Israeli and Jewish people. We're currently living in an environment in which people think that discrimination against Jewish people is acceptable because they see it so much on social media. So Adiel decided to throw it back in their faces a little bit and put it into perspective. Let's take a look.
Excuse me, Mr. Guide. There's a group of black people here, and, can I just switch groups? Because it's making me feel really uncomfortable.
I'm in this scuba trip with 3 Asians, and, I just don't want to talk to them. It's making me seem like I'm antisocial, but, I don't want to talk to them, because, with all that happened in World War II, what the Japanese did, what if their grandparents did some fucked up shit in Vietnam? I don't know.
Where's it from? Armenia. Oh, I'm all for Azerbaijan, by the way, just so you know, I'm just putting it out there. From Ukraine. Interesting. Did you kill in Russian? Free Catalonia! Free Catalonia! Yeah, I said free Catalonia, you know? Visiting from France, right? Welcome, yeah. We don't really like you people here. From Dubai, that's cool, Like, you have a lot of money to travel, right? Because, like, you guys are really rich, and you guys, like, control the, like, you guys have a lot of money. Like, you're from China? Oh.
Of course, beyond being funny, he is unfortunately absolutely correct. None of us would or should accept this type of hateful bigotry and discrimination against various minorities and nationalities that we may encounter. And yet, every one of these examples is an actual video that's gone viral, or at least semi-viral, on social media of people thinking that it's acceptable to say these kinds of things about Jews and/or Israelis. It isn't. If you wouldn't say this about any other minority group, why would you think it's okay to say about Jews? You don't have to like Israeli policy or to like the Israeli government to be a decent and civilized human being towards people you may disagree with. The fact that this radicalism has been tolerated more and more with every day and further amplified by social media is a social phenomenon that has the potential to destroy the West. Just as I always warned that what starts with Jews never ends with the Jews. We have to push back against this before it grows even larger. The bigotry that we see in some of the online content today is sheer demonization and dehumanization of millions of people based on their nationality. Those are not the values of the Western world. Those are not the values of a liberal democracy. Those are the values of a third world jihadist cult. And unfortunately, the West has allowed far too many of those people into their countries. It's time to push back. And finally, our good story of the week, which comes from none other than U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who this week addressed that Munich security conference I mentioned earlier when I was there. Now, his entire speech was absolutely phenomenal. So much so that he even got a standing ovation from the Europeans, not something to be taken lightly these days. But the way that he spoke about the failures and the current state of the international community, particularly the UN, is exactly what the entire world needs to hear. Let's take a look.
We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored. And we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. And it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice. In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world.
Exactly.
And we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law, which they themselves routinely violate.
Exactly. It's a tragic but correct assessment of the status quo today. And the longer that Europe and the rest of the Western world ignore it, the harder it's going to be to reform it. I remind you that this past week, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres sent a letter to the Islamic Republic of Iran extending his warmest greetings on behalf of the anniversary of the Islamic regime. This is a matter of weeks after that same regime brutally massacred more than 40,000 people and continues carrying out torture, sexual violence, and executions of Iranian citizens for protesting. If that's not enough, the UN also invited an official of the Islamic Republic to address the Human Rights Council. After immense pushback, they canceled the invitation, but invited a different official instead. They just can't get it right. And that is exactly what shows how correct Marco Rubio was in everything he said. And that does it for this week on Axis of Truth. We will, as always, be back next week with more stories and updates from across the region. If you have a story for me, feel free to reach out on social media at Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv on Instagram. And we'll see you next week on Axis of Truth on JNS.
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Kalev Ben-David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. The U.S. and Iran hold a second round of talks in Geneva with reports of some progress, but no breakthrough to a nuclear deal. This as Iran stages a major military naval exercise in the Straits of Hormuz, and the U.S. continues its buildup with the deployment of 50 more fighter jets to the region. President Trump will convene the first working meeting of his Board of Peace in Washington on February 19th, saying the world leaders who attend will have already pledged $5 billion for the reconstruction of Gaza. Amid ongoing operations in Gaza, the IDF identifies and eliminates 6 terrorists in the Rafah area and uncovers a large arms cache, including RPG rockets intended for use against Israeli forces in the Strip. The IDF's 91st Division eliminates 4 terrorists involved in attempting to rebuild Hezbollah's military infrastructure in South Lebanon, as Hezbollah rejects the Lebanese government's latest plan to disarm the terror group in accordance with its ceasefire agreement with Israel. Israel Aerospace Industries says the new Arrow 4 system is likely to be deployed in the coming months, boosting Israel's air defense capabilities, including its ability to intercept hypersonic ballistic missiles. And now our big story. U.S. negotiators Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner met Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in Geneva Wednesday for the second round of talks mediated by Oman to reach an agreement on Tehran's nuclear program and possibly other issues. Araghchi said there was some progress and guiding principles were agreed on, but U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance sounded more downbeat, asserting Iran has yet to agree to the red line set out by President Trump. Meanwhile, the military buildup between the countries continues, with Iran staging naval drills in the Straits of Hormuz and the U.S. deploying dozens more fighter jets in the region. Here's Trump and Araghchi on the talks.
So I'll be involved in those talks indirectly, and they'll be very important. We'll see what can happen. I mean, but typically, Iran's a very tough negotiator. They're good negotiators or bad negotiators. I would say they're bad negotiators because we could have had a deal instead of sending the B-2s in to knock out their nuclear potential, and we had to send the B-2s. I hope they're going to be more reasonable. They want to make a deal.
A new window of opportunity has opened, under which we had the second round of the negotiations with the United States earlier today here in Geneva. We are hopeful that negotiation will lead to a sustainable and negotiated solution which can serve the interest of relevant parties and the broader region. At the same time, as demonstrated during the aggression of 13 June 2025, Iran remains fully prepared to defend itself against any threat or act of aggression. The consequences of any attack against Iran will not be confined to its borders.
Joining us now is Ambassador Michael Oren, the former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. He's also a former deputy minister and member of Knesset. Ambassador Oren, thank you for joining us. Michael, just in the last few hours before we're speaking, there have been reports suggesting the talks are failing and the U.S. attack could come even sooner than many anticipated, even in the next few days. I mean, what are your feelings about that?
Good to be with you, Kalev. Always good to be here. Of course they're failing. There was never really much of a chance that they were going to succeed. The United States came to the talks with 3 major demands: that Iran dismantles its nuclear program, ceases to enrich uranium, that Iran dismantles the plants that are making ballistic missiles that can strike Israel with tremendous, tremendous warheads, and that Iran sees its support for terror across the Middle East and the world. And if Iran were to give up on these three demands, the Iranian regime would not be the Iranian regime anymore. This is their DNA. This is who they are. So there was never much of a chance that they could agree, even on the question of the so-called right to enrich, which the Iranians arrogate to themselves. And having said that, then the question is, okay, when does this take place? When is there what they call a kinetic action, military action take place? Under what circumstances? What are the goals? And what is the aftermath? What does the day after look like? The immediate problem the United States has is building up sufficient forces in the Middle East, a critical mass. Before, they had one aircraft carrier. On an aircraft carrier, the USS Lincoln, there are 90 planes. 70 of them are warplanes. 70 warplanes to cover an area which is larger than France and Germany combined, with a population, Iranian population of 90 million. It's not much. It's a pinprick.
Right.
So they had to bring in many more planes, as they have now, 50 more warplanes. Another aircraft carrier scheduled to arrive in maybe the coming days, maybe the coming weeks. It takes a long time to get an aircraft carrier from Norfolk, Virginia, to the Persian Gulf. And also the strategic bombers that are in the area. I mean, in theory, a strategic bomber can take off from Idaho and reach Iran within about 20 hours. That's easy.
Right, which we saw last June.
Sure. And so they can. But you have to bring a critical mass. And then the big question, the immediate question after that is, what can the Iranians do to these forces? And here, I'm a military historian by profession, and I'm a little bit older than you, believe it or not. And I'm going to give you two historical cautionary notes that I think the Americans remember very well. One was the bombing of the USS Cole in the year 2000 in the port of Aden. It was struck by a suicide speedboat. And caused tremendous damage. Iran probably has innumerable speedboats like this. The Houthis certainly have them. The Houthis love martyrdom. The Syrian militias, the Iraqi militias that are backed by Iran. That's one. Then there's the missiles. Iran has thousands of drones, missiles, ground-to-sea missiles. And the other cautionary note goes back a little bit further to 1982, the Falklands War. Where the Argentinians fired a French-made Exocet missile at the largest British destroyer, the Sheffield, and basically knocked it out and killed a great number of British soldiers. So all you need is one of these rockets to get through. All you need is one of the drones to get through. And so the United States has to truly build up its anti-missile, anti-drone capabilities in this area in order to go to war.
Right. Now, you said the talks are clearly failing. But the Iranian foreign minister certainly doesn't give that impression.
Of course he doesn't.
Is he just misreading the situation, or is he dissembling, and to what purpose?
Here's the purpose. He knows that an American military operation against Iran does not have a tremendous amount of support within the American public. I think that's probably an overstatement, by the way. Has very little support, and almost negligible. With the Democrats, none. But even within the Republican Party, even within the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, people have said, wait a minute, Mr. President, you promised us during the election that you were going to focus on America first. What's with this Venezuela? What's with the Ukraine? What's with Gaza? And now Iran? We can't even find Iran on a map. Why are you doing this? Why are you risking the lives of American soldiers? J.D. Vance said several days ago, he may have changed his message since then, was that, if the Iranian people want to overthrow their government, that's their business. It's not our business. We just don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. So what the Iranian foreign minister is doing, and he's saying to the American public, look, everything's going great. We're having terrific negotiations. There's no reason to go to war right now. And so it makes the administration's PR problem a little bit more difficult. There's also in the background, there are the midterm elections coming up. And even in the Wall Street Journal today, talked about the very grave difficulties that the Republicans are going to have to retain the House of Representatives. If they lose it, in terms of legislation, it turns the administration into a lame duck for the remainder of its term in office. It cannot advance domestic legislation. And so if people are dissatisfied, disaffected with the fact that the president is not focusing on domestic issues, but focusing on Iran, much less losing American service people in a battle with Iran, that could definitely impact the outcome of those elections.
Right. Now, you said one of the questions remaining is what would be the goal of a U.S. military operation. Last June, it was clear, knocking out the nuclear program. What would be the goal if the U.S. goes to a military operation in this case? Is it regime change? Is it just teaching Iran a lesson?
I don't think any amount of military action can bring down a regime. I don't care if you knock out all their bases. You're talking about a a regime that has somewhere more than 500,000 men under arms just in the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards. It has 500,000 men under arms in the army, and between 2 and 5 million members of the besieged. This is this paramilitary group that beats people over the head if they go out and demonstrate. It's a very powerful regime, very deep-seated. The only way that the regime falls, I believe, would be simultaneously with the American military action or Israeli military action, which I think we should talk about, the people go out to the street again, and they bring down that regime. Then the question is going to go, okay, what's the next government going to look like? Could it be an element in the IRGC that takes over, and they may conclude, gee, if we had had a nuclear weapon, this wouldn't have happened. We better run ahead and get a nuclear weapon. Or is it the Shah's son moving from Long Island to Tehran? And we know him very well and respect him, and he seems to have a certain degree of support, certainly outside of Iran, with Iranian expatriates. But within Iran, we don't know. There are questions. There are certainly questions that loom.
Right. So you talked about Israeli military action. Last June, it was the U.S. joining up with Israel. What would be the situation for Israel here? Would Israel join immediately, wait for Iran to strike? And again, what would we know what Israel wants to achieve would that even be achievable with its military?
I think we have to avoid at all costs a situation where we're perceived as striking first and dragging America into war.
Right.
I've just come back to the United States. American Jews are very concerned about this. There's a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism with the claim that, Jews drag America into war that they don't need in the Middle East, unnecessary wars. So, certainly, Israel has much skin in the game. And the same questions that maybe plague a number of Americans do not plague us. For us, the devil we know is worse than the devil we don't know. We'd probably take any regime over the current regime. And we have that additional strategic threat of the Iranian ballistic missiles, which are a serious strategic threat. If Iran can continue to produce these missiles at the speed at which they're doing it now, they, by the end of the year, can have 3,000 missiles. One of these missiles can take down not a building, but a neighborhood. And it's certainly an unacceptable threat to the state of Israel. So we'd have to act anyway. My assumption would be that Iran will fire at us, and we'll be in what I call a Dirty Harry situation. If you remember the movie where Dirty Harry says, go ahead, pull the trigger, make my day.
Make my day.
Make my day, make our day. And I mentioned there were 90 of these planes on an aircraft carrier. The number of actual warplanes that the Israeli Air Force has is classified, but let's say it's something over than 200.
Okay.
And that is already a massive force. And we also have naval assets, which didn't play a huge role in the last war. They could play a significant role in this war.
Right. And I do want to ask you, there were the reports, the Fars agency of Iran announced that there will be a joint Iranian-Russian military exercise in the Gulf of Oman, the Indian Sea. What are the dangers of Iran trying to basically choke off the Gulf and impact on the delivery of oil and natural gas?
Again, I'm sorry for doing this. Dirty Harry.
Okay.
Make my day. What do they have? They do not have large naval vessels. They have basically missile boats, which can be taken out. And I'd like to see them try to close the Straits of Hormuz. I think that there are many people in the U.S. Navy would welcome that opportunity to try out their ship-to-ship ordnance. And I don't think they have the capability. What they do have the capability to doing is, first of all, firing missiles at, say, Saudi refineries, Emirati refineries, even at American bases in the Middle East. There are 40,000 American soldiers deployed in the Middle East. They'll certainly be targets, dragging Israel in. And I think the biggest target for the Iranians will be one of these very large American warships, certainly an aircraft carrier. They're going to be pummeled. I know that the difficulties the U.S. Navy had in fighting the Houthis. Fighting just the Houthis. Right. And they lost 3 airplanes off one of these aircraft carriers because they had a maneuver around and around so fast to dodge the missiles. That's just the Houthis. Imagine the Iranians.
All right. So certainly we're looking at a more serious operation, war even, let's say, than last June. Lasting a couple of weeks, maybe even more than that.
We don't know. We don't know how strong that first strike will be. If the first strike can really be a knockout. Okay. But I want to add with sort of a controversial notion is that I raised some eyebrows last summer on Israeli television by everyone was sort of doing victory laps, how much we had beaten the Iranians. I said, wait a minute, are we certain that the Iranians don't think they won this war? That they stood up for 12 days against the biggest superpower in the world. They survived. They they fired a few missiles at Qatar and Trump backed down, they may conclude that they can withstand this.
Right.
They'll lose a few bases, they'll lose a few leaders. At the end of the day, all they have to do, it's like Hamas, all they have to do is win, is not lose.
All right. And again, make my day. That seems to be their threat they're putting to the U.S. And Israel. Ambassador Oren, stay with us. I want to move to another issue. The U.S. is pushing ahead with the second phase of its peace plans for Gaza, with the convening in Washington, D.C. of world leaders and officials set to fund and oversee the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. President Trump says those nations have already pledged some $5 billion for the task, although much more will be needed. And Indonesia has become the first country to agree to provide armed forces for an international stabilization force. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar will attend the summit despite Israel's objections to the inclusion of Qatar and Turkey. Meanwhile, Hamas terrorists continue to attack IDF forces in Gaza, and the big question remains whether the terror group will disarm as per the agreement and who will oversee that process. Michael, you veteran diplomat in Washington, Gideon Saar is going there. There was a lot of discussion about whether Israel should even be represented there at the conference. What do you think he'll say? What do you think he should say? What advice do you have for the?
Well, I don't think it needs my advice. I think he's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I think Israel should be represented there, and I think it'll be well represented with Foreign Minister Saar. I think the major issue is the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, the dismantling the Hamas military capabilities, disarming them. Without that happening, I don't see how this is going to work. I really don't. You can get the Indonesian troops in there, but what exactly are they going to do? They have said very succinctly that they will not fight Hamas. Okay, so who is going to fight Hamas? Are they just going to serve as a shield for Hamas? We're going to have to fire over the heads of these Indonesians. Hopefully, don't hit any of them, and the Hamas will simply use them. They'll hide behind them. So I don't see where we move from here other than that. The danger would be that someone may think, okay, we'll just get Hamas to put their guns in, say, a warehouse with a key.
Or putting their so-called heavy weapons, but letting them have firearms.
Right.
That is the danger that Israel is concerned. How realistic is that, and how should Israel deal with that without, in a way, going publicly against President Trump and his big plans?
It's not easy. That's the hard thing. Up to this point, we have not said to President Trump really no to anything. Not easy to say no to this president. We may have to say thank you, but I think Israel has to have a red line. I think it is a red line. Those small arms were the arms that killed most of the people on October 7th. Those small arms are AK-47s, and they are deadly in the extreme. And we cannot. That is the principle of the 20 points. We accept the 20 points on the basis of that as the assumption that Hamas would be disarmed. And if that doesn't happen, then the status quo will continue.
Until when? Because, again, we just discussed Iran, the fact that this is an ongoing situation that could last weeks or months. At what point does Israel, should it be ready to press the administration, say, enough time has passed, we need to go in and finish the job with Hamas?
We may do that during the course of the war. I would assume that we're going to act very, very strongly in southern Lebanon to complete the mission of driving Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon.
If Hezbollah attacks Israel as part of the...
Even if it doesn't.
Really?
Even if it doesn't. We'll take advantage of that opportunity. And there we have far less disagreements with the Trump administration. With Gaza, we may also have to avail ourselves of that opportunity to move in there. The status quo that exists, and here again I may ruffle a few feathers, is not the worst outcome for the state of Israel. Hamas went to war against us on October 7th. The Palestinians went to war against us, and when you go to war, you risk losing land. The IDF now holds 53% of Gaza. We could hold those 53% in perpetuity until such a time as maybe there's a peace treaty, and that would be the price they pay. Obviously, Hamas does not care about how many
But there is a price
the
IDF is paying, because there are soldiers being injured, and there are fatalities on the Israeli side just from these skirmishes along the yellow line.
Certainly, and we have to respond very, very forcefully to each one and every one of them. But to let Hamas sit in the debris of the part of Gaza that they hold, to receive virtually no foreign assistance in the terms of actual money, no arms, is a better outcome than having a situation where there's an international force there that will serve as a shield for Hamas and not disarm Hamas. That for Israel would be the worst case scenario.
Well, it does seem this force is moving ahead. Indonesia first country to publicly commit itself to providing troops for that force. This is a country that Israel has no diplomatic relations with, even though there have been, of course, rumors for years about secret contacts. How comfortable should be, under any circumstances, for these foreign troops to be, would be unprecedented to be, for example, moving into any part of the Gaza Strip?
It's good for our relationship with Indonesia. And you're true, we have had many contacts with Indonesia. They're not considered an enemy country. But what are they going to do?
Right.
What are they going to do? They have said they will not fight Hamas. If that's the case, and I have grave concern in general about the Western position about Gaza. There's a plan to build these very nice communities that resettle the people who have been displaced, and they'll have schools, and they'll have clinics, and they'll have sewage, and they'll have medical care, and all be very, very beautiful. But if you do not change the education system, if you don't begin to educate a generation, and it will take 20 years. If you don't educate them that peace is the goal, that killing women and children and raping and beheading children is not the goal, then simply you're going to have very, very nice neighborhoods with Hamas in them. And very soon, by the way. And it requires patience. It requires patience and a fundamental understanding of how societies in this area of the world work.
Right. Well, that is actually going to be, that would, as you said, would be a long process, and it is going to, as you say, require much patience moving forward. We'll have to see if the Trump administration has that patience. We know President Trump likes to see quick results.
And as do people in Israel. Remember the Peace Now movement?
Right.
They wanted peace now. This is peace maybe in 20 years.
All right. Well, we'll have to see, even in the next few months, if any progress is made toward any of those goals. Ambassador and Dr. Michael Oren, thank you for joining us here on ILTV Security Brief. And now a final word. Last week, the IDF, responding to a petition filed under Israel's Freedom of Information Act by the group Hatzlacha, published for the first time the exact numbers of soldiers serving in the military while holding foreign citizenship. The information revealed that 50,632 soldiers hold foreign citizenship in addition to that of Israel, with over 12,000 from the U.S., some 6,000 from France, and 5,000 from Russia. Now, this story attracted little media notice here in Israel, but it generated headlines in foreign media that are hostile to Israel, such as Qatar's Al Jazeera and Iran's Press TV. Now, it is not illegal or problematic for immigrants from most countries to serve in the IDF while still retaining their original citizenship. But since the October 7th war began, various groups and websites, including Zionist Watch, Canada's The Maple, and the Hind Rajab Foundation, have targeted Israeli soldiers by doxing them. That is, publicizing their private personal details with the purpose of intimidation or harassment by activists, or exposing them to possible legal action in other countries. There have been several incidents in recent years when Israelis who have served in Gaza were doxed by these organizations while traveling abroad, leading them to have to quickly and surreptitiously return home to Israel from visits to such countries as Belgium and Brazil. Now, especially vulnerable to this kind of threat are those Israeli soldiers or veterans who hold foreign citizenship and still maintain strong connections to their countries of origin. The danger is especially acute for immigrants from such nations as South Africa, which has officially accused Israel of genocide, and where pro-Palestinian groups are urging the government to identify and prosecute South African Jews who have served in the IDF. The Israeli government and defense establishment have started to recognize the extent of this problem. And last year, the IDF belatedly forbade its soldiers from putting on social media any photos or posts that identify them doing military service, unless, of course, they have official permission to do so. Still, more can and must be done. Most Western countries, in particularly EU nations and the United States, have strict laws forbidding the publication of another individual's personal details. But the enforcement of these laws often tends to be more lax, especially in such countries as the UK and Canada, where pro-Palestinian activists have been active in doxing and then harassing both visiting Israelis and their own citizens who have served in the IDF. Official Israeli bodies such as the Foreign Ministry must be more vigorous in lobbying for these foreign governments to demonstrate greater vigilance in enforcing their own laws against doxing and harassment, while supporting Israeli and Jewish NGOs that are willing and able to provide the moral support and legal assistance which may be required in such cases. Now, it may be that I feel a strong personal connection to this matter as a dual Israeli-American citizen who once served in the IDF. But it is an issue every Israeli who supports the IDF should be aware about and invested in. This generation of soldiers who have already sacrificed so much on the battlefields in Gaza, Judea and Samaria, the Northern Front and elsewhere, and especially those who have left their birthplaces behind to come and serve the Jewish state in an IDF uniform, deserve better than to find themselves potentially facing another battle every time they step outside the borders of Israel. Thank you for joining ILTV Security Brief.
New evidence obtained by ILTV shows the Islamic Republic is paying for influencers, including from the United States and United Kingdom, to whitewash the regime's crimes against the Iranian people, something which may violate U.S. sanctions law. Let's take a closer look. Outrage from Iranians inside and outside the country.
Glory to all the martyrs.
A delegation of 15 influencers tour Iran on what appears to be the regime's dime.
Police in Iran are defending the revolution and are defending their government.
The delegation was organized by the Sob Media Center, Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting.
Never fall into alternative propaganda.
Additional risks include the possibility of recruitment for espionage or hostage-taking for foreign nationals.
What's amazing, guys, is I have walked this entire rally in the middle of Iran without a hijab on.
A delegation of 15 influencers tour Iran on what appears to be the regime's dime, even as Tehran continues its violent crackdown after a campaign of mass murder of its own citizens. This week, an ILTV investigation has discovered that among the participants are U.S. national Kala Walsh and a UK national Bushra Sheikh, raising serious concerns about sanctions violations both in Washington and in London. The delegation was organized by the Sob Media Center, a state-linked entity affiliated with the state media network, Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting. The organizer of the tour has also been identified as Ahmed Nourouzi, the vice president of IRIB's World Service. According to the U.S. Treasury, Nourouzi is listed on the specially designated nationals list under the Iran sanctions program. Treasury records link him directly to IRIB, which the U.S. sanctioned for broadcasting forced confessions and acting as a tool of state repression. In late January, Nourouzi publicly issued a call for filmmakers and activists to join what he described as a special media tour to Iran. Photos posted from inside the country show members of the delegation attending official meetings and regime gatherings. In one image shared by Bushra Sheikh, Nourouzi appeared seated at the head of a formal meeting during the visit. Also among the participants is U.S. national Kala Walsh, and this is not her first visit. During a previous regime-organized trip, also by Sob, Walsh appeared on stage at an event in Iran where she chanted, "Death to America."
May we see victory within our lifetimes. Margabar America, Margabar Israel.
Iranian state and parliamentary records show that the Iranian parliament approved a cultural budget provision authorizing up to $20 million for contracts with foreign individuals to assist in nation branding. Reporting in November 2024 from Iranian state media also confirmed that the Tehran municipality covered flights and hospitality costs for a delegation of 12 foreign influencers.
The trip by these influencers to Iran raises tremendous concerns. I believe that the Sob International Media Festival is kind of a repackaged outfit for the Islamic Republic to use to recruit Westerners to amplify the regime's propaganda to Western audiences.
Additional risks include the possibility of recruitment for espionage or hostage-taking for foreign nationals from both the U.S. and the U.K.
There have been instances where one arm of the Iranian state invites American or your Western nationals to a, quote, conference in Iran, only for another arm of the Iranian state to take them hostage. And we've seen this before in some hostage cases.
As of now, neither the U.S. nor the U.K. authorities have publicly announced an investigation. However, based on publicly available documentation, the participation of both of them in a state-sponsored trip organized by a U.S.-sanctioned official presents significant potential legal exposure under existing sanctions frameworks.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest headlines from across the region. U.S. President Donald Trump is again signaling that military action against Iran is on the table as the USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, has entered the Mediterranean with its strike group moving east towards Iran. U.S. Air Force strategic airlifters have also been deployed to Europe. Here's Trump.
Do you have any message to the Iranian people?
The Iranian people in Iran or people here?
People in Iran.
They better negotiate a fair deal. They better negotiate. You know, the people of Iran are a lot different than the leaders of Iran. And it's very, very sad situation.
Options reportedly include targeting Iranian military leaders, striking nuclear and security facilities, and even contingency plans that could aim at regime change, though officials stress no final decision has been made. Iran's foreign minister says a written counterproposal could be ready within days and insists the U.S. has not demanded zero uranium enrichment, despite previous statements from Washington. Tehran says it is prepared for confidence-building measures to prove its program is peaceful. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff says President Donald Trump is curious as to why Iran has not yielded under mounting U.S. pressure as nuclear talks between the sides remain stalled on core issues.
The president asked me that this morning, and I don't want to use the word frustrated. It's almost because he understands he's got plenty of alternatives. But it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't, I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated. Why under this sort of pressure with the amount of sea power, naval power that we have over there, why they haven't come to us and said, we profess that we don't want a weapon, so here's what we're prepared to do, and yet it's hard to sort of get them to that place.
Now inside Iran, anti-regime demonstrations erupted across universities in the country as the new semester began, chanting anti-government slogans such as "Death to Khamenei" and calls for regime change. The rallies coincided with mourning ceremonies held 40 days after last month's deadly nationwide crackdown in which thousands of innocent protesters were brutally gunned down by the regime. At Amir Kabir University of Technology, video shows demonstrators chanting "Long live the King," a reference to Reza Pahlavi, son of Iran's ousted monarch. The student union says security forces later blocked exits and detained participants. Hezbollah says 8 of its operatives were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon's eastern Bekaa Valley, including a figure it identified as a commander, Hossein Mohammad Yagi. The IDF says it targeted 3 Hezbollah missile command centers, killing a large number of operatives. Lebanese media report at least 10 people killed and more than 50 wounded. President Joseph Aoun condemned the recent Israeli airstrikes in the Sidon and Bekaa Valley regions, saying the attacks frustrate efforts to stabilize the country. He called the strikes a hostile act that undermines diplomatic initiatives led by Lebanon and its partners, including the United States. Meanwhile, a Saudi report claims Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRGC, is now effectively running Hezbollah, preparing the Lebanese terror group for a possible war with Israel and the United States. U.S. commentator Tucker Carlson is facing backlash after falsely claiming that President Isaac Herzog visited Jeffrey Epstein's infamous island. The remark was made during Carlson's interview in Israel with U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Carlson asserted that Herzog was listed as a visitor of Epstein, despite there being no evidence of any connection between the Israeli president and Epstein. Huckabee responded that he was unaware of any such link, which indeed never existed. After learning the claims were false, Huckabee said the allegations could be the stuff of libel lawsuits. Carlson later issued an apology on X for the misinformation. That's all for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. You can scan the QR code on your screen for our WhatsApp channel for constant updates throughout the day. I'm Alec Pollard, and I will see you next time.
For years, we have been lied to about the Middle East, Israel and Gaza. And today, 5 stories that could reshape the Middle East, and almost no one is connecting the dots. Welcome back, everybody, to The Quad here in our Jerusalem studios with my wonderful co-host, Emily Schrader, human rights activist and journalist, Shoshana Keats-Jaskal, the founder of Chokhmat Nashim, elevating and representing Orthodox women's voices, and Bellamy Bellucci,